I liken it to driving a car and basically finding that red line, that point where like the top end of your nasal breathing, ability, that point where you feel like you need to open your mouth, and you might push it to there, or you might push it a little bit too hard. Say if your training session is, I want to stick to nasal breathing only, you might push it a little bit too hard, where you have to open your mouth. But then the idea is to get back to that nasal as quick as you can.
Okay, everyone. So welcome back to the Performance Through Health podcast. It's been a little while since I've actually done one of these, but today I've got human performance coach Jason Donaldson. Jason, you've been in the industry for 15 years, so I think you're a bit more of a veteran than I am in this industry. And now I've known that you've seen you're on the Oxygen Advantage recording, so you've gone that far. And I know you were doing some work with Shift Adapt, and you started to, I think you're involved heavily with maybe the development of that. And you're essentially, from what I gather, is that you're helping people implement their practical health tools, wellness tools into their life to try and help them build their version of their high performance lifestyle. So I really liked the word that you use, your version. Where did that come from, do you think? And why have you taken that particular approach?
It really comes from when I've had discussions with people around what success means for them. And success means different things for different people, and it's what is your version of success, and it also success differs in different situations or different areas of your life as well. What might mean success in one area could be totally different in another area, and that's really where your version of a high performance life came into it, because not everyone's version of a high performance life is people think high performer is a entrepreneur that runs 5 businesses and, drives a Ferrari and all that sort of stuff. But that's totally not my version of a high performance life. Why would I assume that it's someone else's version as well? So it really comes down to what is your version of, high performance, your version of success, your version of, good, purposeful, meaningful life, or whatever it might be. So it's up to the individual to decide what that is for them.
I love that, because the concept of performance through health came through exactly similar thing. It's like, okay, well, what is performance? Performance to you is like, it could be you just want to make yourself healthier, so you could be the best mother you could be. You want to say you want to have a bit more energy so that you can take your children to the park and run around with them. Like that's what is success to you. And I think a lot of people come through to the likes of us, in an industry where we're helping people deal with stress or breathing, and their version of success is something that is so extrinsic and so kind of like, it's externally motivated, that sometimes when you start to ask them the questions of what they truly want in their life, it impacts them, because they realize that they've gone through a whole path of what they think's performance and realize actually that's not what I want.
Yeah, definitely. It's and even just asking people those questions, sometimes it's the first time they've actually thought about it. When I had a gym for 8 years, and one of the first things you'd ask people when they came in for like an intro session was, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve through your training? And most people are like, I just want to get fitter. And then you'd ask them, well, what does that mean to you? What does fitness mean to you? What does getting a little bit fitter actually look like, feel like? And, they just kind of look at you a lot of the time and go, I don't really know. I haven't thought about that. I just, want to get fit. So it's kind of the first time a lot of the time when you ask those questions, the first time they turn their mind to it. And even that process of asking the questions can lead, to where they want to go, or help them, a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the whole point of the questions you're asking, right? Is bringing that awareness to bring the thoughts into their mind, to really go, what is it that you want to get, especially as a coach. I think the coach, a lot of people get confused between education and coaching. Education is just giving people knowledge and just telling people how to do, which I think in whether you're in a healthcare situation, whether you're in a performance situation, or whether you're even in school, asking questions is a much easier way to even educate, because you're bringing awareness to the thought process, not just the knowledge they need.
Definitely. And that's, that awareness, everything starts with the awareness, and then, on the questions are great. There's, can't remember who the quote's from, but it's, if you want a better answer, ask a better question. And through asking those questions, you can develop that awareness, you can learn more. And, over the last few years, I've got more into that kind of asking myself different questions and analysing my own thinking or my own behaviour and my own actions. And, and earlier this year, I started studying counselling for that very reason, was to go into the whole behaviour side of things behind humans. I'd looked for a while at different courses and study options for coaching, but a lot of them were, postgraduate, and a lot of them were kind of designed around leadership coaching versus, health coaching. And there's a few kind of health and wellness type coaching courses available, that kind of certificate and diploma level, but I kind of wanted something a little bit more. And since starting to study counselling, it's been great, learning some of the things there, and not just about myself, but about how other people, how people operate, and also some of the questions I've been asking for years in coaching, even just strength and conditioning coaching, I've discovered kind of come from different types of therapies, which or are used in different types of therapies, which I didn't really even know when I was asking those questions. So that's interesting.
I can definitely see how it could benefit. Like I saw on your profile that you were starting to study this counselling before. It's a fantastic idea to be able to develop a skill that's away from the traditional norm of what a coach might be, to be able to go deeper into the questions, to figure out the why. What is the belief that you're holding on to that maybe is preventing you from being able to create the change that you need to improve your performance, your health, your wellness, whatever it is you want. And I think that counselling is going to give you that extra touch, right?
Yeah, and then that's exactly what I wanted to go into it. I'd written training programs for years, helped people with nutrition, some general nutrition advice over the years, and sleep advice and things like that, and the breathing and breath work. But giving people the information, as you said before, difference between being an educator and coach, and then actually helping them to implement the change, to actually take action. That's where the secret sauce is really, is that actual implementation of the information, or the actioning of the information. And that's getting people to get out of their own way, really, and do that. And it's all stuff I've struggled with myself personally over the years, and I think most humans do.
So I guess if we were to delve a bit into maybe a methodology, did you follow particular methodologies? Do you kind of keep it open to raising questions to where you start? Do you have a typical starting point? I know you're breath based, but you're also holistic in terms of everything you look at. What kind of avenues do you take with people?
It really depends on what's presented to me. What's in front of me, what the individual is going through, what they want to achieve, that sort of thing. And then I'll kind of utilise whatever tools are in my toolkit to help them make those changes. And those tools, the toolkit is constantly expanding. The tools are getting refreshed, renewed, and that sort of thing. Up until 5 years ago or so, breath wasn't even a tool in the toolkit. I had no awareness of it. So, and it's just constant evolution of tools, and then it's how to actually implement it with the individual. Really depends on. It starts with a conversation. Really, just having a conversation with them, where they're at, where they want to go, and then how I can actually help them get there. Yeah, okay. There's no one system or methodology. It's very kind of fluid and dynamic.
Yeah, nice. And when you're, I guess, when you're delving into people's breathing, and you're looking at, many people have never ever looked at their breathing, and I think the number one thing I say to people, the number one mistake you're making is not paying attention to your breathing, because as soon as you start to pay attention, you can realize, right? But what sort of I guess most of the most impactful things that you've found when it comes to changing people's breathing?
Probably just going back to what you just said then, the awareness, I'll put my hand up as someone who was totally unaware of their breath for the first, up until about 5 years ago, first 40 years of my life, and was a chronic mouth breather, had all the issues that come associated with that, with sinus problems, allergies, had braces as a kid and oral surgery due to an underdeveloped jaw. All that sort of stuff that comes with mouth breathing. And it wasn't until 5 years ago or so that I developed an awareness of that. And then once I had that awareness, I was then able to then, build on top of that. And that continues, now, is just being aware of my breath when I'm going about my everyday life, having reinforced a particular breathing pattern for 40 years. It doesn't just go overnight, and it's a constant kind of battle to try and stay on top of that. So, I'll still find myself falling into the habit of mouth breathing at times. And there's times in training when I'll really want to open my mouth, but I've committed to that particular workout as being nasal breathing only. So I just have to reduce my intensity or slow down slightly. So but I think awareness is probably the biggest thing, and comes back to kind of what I said at the start as well. Everything starts with that awareness, and once you've got that, you can then build on top of that. And when you have that awareness of your breath as well, it then helps you to tune into your body, what's going on with your body, different feelings and sensations. And I've had people who have gone on runs with nasal breathing only, and they've said they've actually run faster, but it felt easier. And then people who have done kind of long sessions on a stationary bike, which are generally pretty damn boring, but they've said the time went really quick because they were focused 100% on their breath, and they didn't really notice the time passing. So I say to people, if you're bored, you're not paying attention. So
I think it was maybe May or just around April, May this year. I think I saw a few of your posts, and you started put a few workouts up online, just saying do this nasal breathing, and I started to follow them. And it was just after I'd finished my powerlifting competition, so I was in no state to be to try and be doing nasal breathing while I'm doing burpees and all this sort of stuff. But it did bring the awareness to me in terms of how dysfunctional my breathing was. Or for me, what I realized is that I panic breathe when I start to feel that urge. I noticed that when it's like sending that fear to my mind to say, you need to catch your breath fast. You need to I'll be leaning over. But really what I've managed to learn over the 6 months is that actually you can just take control and you can go back to nasal breathing. And there has been a development in my nasal breathing now to the point where, yes, I can do a run and I find it a lot more meditative. I'm recovering faster. I feel as if, the time goes a bit faster as well. But there is and I know that you were involved with the gearing system, but you also, you have your own gearing system. But there is a time to use the mouth, right? And
absolutely, yep.
Just take us through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, there's... With breathing and with performance, you've always got, you've got training where, what's your goal in training? Is your goal to stimulate an adaptation, or is it to, perform your best in that particular session? And most of, training really is about stimulating adaptations. And then you've got competition. If someone's in a race or an event of some sort, then, they're not interested in adaptations. They're interested in optimizing their performance. And you can't both stimulate adaptations and optimize your performance. You can't do that at the same time. So, first of all, you've got to decide, what do I want to achieve here? So if it's training and you're trying to stimulate adaptations, then that's where you will be a little bit more rigid with how you might use your breath. So if you're trying to get better at nasal breathing, you will, nasal breathe as much as you possibly can, and keep your intensity to a level where you're able to achieve that. But you also want to push the edge of that comfort zone. It's like, I always bring it back to driving a car, which I've kind of learned doesn't help with all audiences, because not everybody knows how to drive a manual transmission car. I worked recently last season with an AFL football club, and one of the first things I said to the group there was, these are a group of 44 guys, kind of from 18 to the oldest one, I think, is 34, 35, but was like, so who's got a manual car? And I think about 4 people had a manual car. So, and then I said, okay, who's got a manual license? I think about half of them had a manual license. I thought, okay, well, my analogy is not going to work. But getting back to the thing, like the gears, I liken it to driving a car and basically finding that red line, that point where like the top end of your nasal breathing, ability, that point where you feel like you need to open your mouth, and you might push it to there, or you might push it a little bit too hard. Say if your training session is, I want to stick to nasal breathing only, you might push it a little bit too hard where you have to open your mouth. But then the idea is to get back to that nasal as quick as you can. Do a few mouth exhales, get back to it, and understand where that point is. And then over time, you're gradually pushing that point. But then, and the key there is, or the idea there is that with your gears, if you don't train a gear, you're not going to have access to it. So if you never do nasal only, then you're never going to be able to operate nasal only. You're going to go straight to mouth breathing, which is inefficient. So it's about learning, getting that foundation, getting that base, and then knowing when to change gears, just like when you drive a car, knowing when to change gears and then when to change up again, when to change back again. So I always, the example I use of actually using your gears is, and I've done this video or this example a few times on video, on Instagram and stuff, but basically running up a hill. So if you're running along, it's quite an easy, calm, relaxed nasal breathing effort. You're just running along a flat surface, aerobic effort. You see a hill approaching, and as you start running up the hill, the intensity of the effort increases because obviously it's harder. So nasal breathing gets harder. You start getting more acidic in your body. CO2 is building up more. So you need to then get to a point where you need to change gears, or you either need to slow down, stop running up the hill, or you need to open your mouth, blow off a bit of CO2. And that's where you change gears, change up to gear 2 from gear 1's nasal breathing, gear 2, which is that mouth exhale, and you might be able to continue that for a fair distance up the hill, nasal inhale, mouth exhale. But then if that hill continues to go, it's a long, steep hill, then you need to change gears again because, acidity's rising, CO2 levels are increasing more, and then you really need to start, balance up that O2, CO2 a bit more, so you need to suck in a bit more air. So you open your mouth, start inhaling through the mouth, exhaling through the mouth, so you're in gear 3 then, and that's going to be able to do that till you get to the top of the hill. And then once you get to the top of the hill, and you feel like you can, you start, the intensity has dropped because it's flattened out again, then you start going back down the gears and get back to that nasal breathing as soon as you can, get back to that more efficient process. So
it makes complete sense, like exercise physiology wise. When I've looked at, I've done thousands of clinical studies where I get people coming to do graded step tests, and I've never really, at that time when I was doing it and I was working in the clinical field, I was never really thinking of that concept of that. But like, there is that point where you get to the lactate threshold, and most people are going to be breathing through their mouth. So, by keeping your mouth closed and through adaptation over time, as well as doing some maybe potentially CO2 tolerance work outside, we're really pushing the lactate threshold higher, right? In a way. I mean, I don't know whether there's literature that supports that yet or not, but that's the basis of it, right?
Absolutely.
Whether that's physiological, whether it's psychological, whether it's feeling itself, like you just can tolerate a higher level of hydrogen ions in the legs. I know that when I did a short race recently, I did 2.5k run, 500 meter swim, 2.5k to run back. I said to myself, wherever I can, I'm going to do nasal breathing. And the first 2.5k, I was really calm, nice and relaxed. Some girl started to try and talk to me on the run, and I just went, I can't talk and nasal breathe, so I just backed off. And obviously, when it comes to swimming, we can't just breathe through our mouth. But on the way back, I was really struggling with the run back and trying to stay nasal breathing. And I was like, I'm going to have to walk. I'm going to have to actually get to a point where I walked. So I did open my mouth, and I found it allowed me to continue to, I guess, race. And that's where it's making that decision. Do you want to perform or do you want to adapt?
Exactly.
And in that time where I was in actual competition, anyone's going to take it competitively and want to try and do the best they can. So for me to switch from the nasal in and breath out, it helped me prevent me from walking in that second 2.5K. So it's not just it's practical. It really works. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and I did a duathlon recently, similar to what you did, but it was 2.5K run, 15K bike, 2.5K run. And the first run, nasal for the first part of it, but then there was quite a large hill. It was only a short hill, but I used my gears on that to be able to power up the hill, like actually run up the hill fast rather than really slowing down, and then recovered my breath coming back down again. Then on the bike was nasal the whole time. Much easier to maintain nasal on a bike than it is running. That comes down to your movement efficiency as well, which is why you would have, going back to the event you did, that's why that second run for you would have been so hard, nasal breathing, was because the swim would have took a lot out of you. Because obviously you're pretty new to swimming, so you're not an efficient mover in the water. Neither am I. That's why I did a duathlon that didn't include swimming. So I didn't do a triathlon. So if you're inefficient in any way, that's going to obviously use more energy, and you're going to have to change gears accordingly. So, and then on the second run for my duathlon, I just basically put my foot down and went fast. So just use my gears for that, and it was pretty much sprinting by the end, just breathing in and out through my mouth, because even though I'd said to people, I'll just see how it goes, I'll just having a bit of fun. I'm competitive by nature, so I wanted to do well. So I wasn't just going to cruise along. So but the whole time I was like conscious of my breathing throughout the entire race. That was pretty much all I was thinking about: how am I breathing, and when can I change gears? And worked well for me. So, and it's kind of what I do with most of my training now. When I'm going out on runs or the bike or even just lifting in the gym, how am I breathing? And it comes back to whatever the goal is for that training session.
Nice. So obviously we've got nasal breathing is the first point to start to create adaptation to rising CO2 levels, rising hydrogen levels, buffering acid and things like that. Then there's the stuff that they talk about in the oxygen advantage, where you're using exhale breath holds. I've not gone past the advanced sort of stuff in terms of the instructors, so I haven't gone to the stuff they do with the masters instructors, stuff like that. But when you use the prolonged exhale test for CO2.
The CO2 tolerance test.
CO2 tolerance.
I've used the bulk test as well. I've used both. The difficulty I've had with using the bulk test with people is that subjective feeling of taking that when you feel like you need to take a breath. For some people, it's obviously subjective, so it differs a lot, and it doesn't take into account mechanics. Whereas the actual CO2 tolerance test, the prolonged exhale, gives you an idea of mechanics as well. It's can they control that exhale? When I first started doing it, the CO2 tolerance test, we're doing it with mouth breathing, just a mouth exhale. And my time was around a minute or so, and then Brian McKenzie told me, he said, try it with your nose. We just started getting into the nasal breathing then, and tried it with my nose, and I think my time was about 9 seconds. I had no idea. I had no idea how to control that exhale via my nose. After trying it a few times, my score went back up to a minute or so, because I'd worked out how to actually control the flow of air through the nose. But that just showed that my mechanics were the issue initially, because I didn't know how to control that air. It wasn't my CO2 tolerance. My CO2 tolerance was still, around a minute, but it was a mechanical issue firstly. So that's why I like using that, because it does more than just tell us CO2 tolerance.
It's interesting because when I started first looking at that sort of CO2 tolerance test, I was like, but there's just it's a learned habit, so your score gets better because it's a learned habit. But anyway, it's the learned habit you want. It's not necessarily the score you want, it's the habit that you want. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're learning how to do the test that you're getting better. The learning is the key to controlling the breath.
Learning how to do that, control that exhale. So and I think I've said to people as well, don't get too caught up with your score. It's like, don't get too caught up in your numbers in the gym. Unless you're a power lifter, it doesn't really matter how much you lift. It's are you, is it achieving, or is it enabling you to do what you want to do outside of that? Nobody wins the CO2 tolerance Olympic event or anything like that.
No. And it's going to, I've done lung function tests on thousands of people. So it's going to make a difference whether you're someone who's 6'5" and whether you're someone's 5'9", because your vital capacity of your lungs is so much different as well. So it's looking at that, okay, can I get that extra 5%, extra 10%, those few questions over a period? And does that translate into your ability to perform and stuff like that as well? But I guess touching on that, when we're pushing onto the advanced side of the CO2 tolerance training, when we're looking at that in terms of the performance for athletes, what kind of protocols have you found the best to be, creating a strong stimulus in that area?
As in to develop their CO2 tolerance?
Yeah.
It's one of those things like, I've seen athletes who have got high CO2 tolerance test scores, but it hasn't really translated into performance in their sport. That comes back down to, how they're actually, how they might be breathing in their everyday life and everything else that kind of encompasses that as well. So what I kind of use the CO2 tolerance test more for now is to determine like readiness for train, stress levels, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So it's, because what we'll see is that when somebody is, in a stressed state, their CO2 tolerance test score is reduced. So it's about establishing a baseline, doing the test, a number of times initially, establish a baseline, and then checking in when you feel like you need to determine where you are in relation to that baseline. And then as far as breath work and full performance, I kind of treat that, I use CO2 tolerance, breath holds, exhale and inhale breath holds, CO2 tolerance development work to improve someone's, it's more their psychological, tolerance of breathlessness, as in, I'm starting to feel breathless. It's like when you do a strong exhale hold or a working exhale hold, and you get those, those diaphragmatic contractions, pushing past that first indication to breathe, or that first trigger to breathe, and just getting people to understand that that's just that first kind of smoke alarm going off. It doesn't mean that you're on fire. You just need you can actually push through that, and improving that kind of more that, that mental attachment to that feeling of needing to breathe. And and that's kind of what I kind of focus that side of things on. That's what I use the CO2 tolerance development stuff for.
It makes sense, obviously. In psychology, the number one thing that they use for fear is exposure therapy, gradual exposure therapy. So it's coming from that concept of, using that panic of the urge to breathe, exposing you to that. Okay. Well, actually, next time, can you go a bit further? Yeah. Can you go a bit further? And before you reduce, and then 8, 10, 12 weeks later, you've reduced or you've increased that tolerance so much that that initial concern is no longer concern for them. So it's the resilience levels kind of stress tolerance levels improved.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. You're just exposing them in a controlled way to a stressor, and then creating that adaptation that way. And yes, the CO2 tolerance score will increase, but I'm more interested in how their actual performance in whatever they're trying to do increases. And also, if there's somebody that's not training for a sport, how their tolerance to stress in their everyday life improves, or at least their awareness to their stress levels. Because a lot of people are stressed the hell out and they don't even know it.
Yeah, I get that a lot. People are so dissociated with how they feel and their energy levels. And we could get people with sleep apnea, 30, 40, 50 apneas a night, and they come in like, I feel fine. It's like,
yeah,
you don't know how you're feeling because you've not paid attention to how you feel for a very long time.
Yeah, you don't understand that you don't have to feel this way. There's actually a different way you can feel.
Yeah,
that's it.
So last question before we wrap up, I just wondered, I know you've done it, you've been taking some of your work into this breathing sort of stuff into some of the footy teams over there in Perth. And how receptive have they been, and how much of an impact has it kind of changed in, I guess, their levels of fitness?
Yeah, it's a tough sell. Not that I'm trying to sell it by any stretch of the imagination. I was approached, but it's like anything. Some players are keen and really interested in doing whatever they can to get a little bit of an edge, and then others have no interest whatsoever. And the interest also comes from different applications of it as well. Whether it's I've worked with one of the guys here on utilising breathing in his goal kicking routine. He's got 30 seconds to go from a very high intense state, to being a bit calmer, being relaxed, and being able to execute his process and his goal kicking. And it's great to watch him during a game. Watch him on TV, and he'll do a couple of mouth breaths as he's walking back to his mark, and then he'll take a nasal inhale and a mouth exhale. So before he kicks, does a couple of those, and 9 times out of 10, when he goes through that process, he'll kick the goal.
Yeah,
and pretty much every time he doesn't follow the process, he'll miss. So
I can just see, with your checkbook, your workbook, just going like, right, yeah, you did it. Yep, you get your statistics.
It's funny because I coach a masters football team as well, and some of the boys there, I'll see them and they'll say, "Oh, I saw him doing his breathing shit when he was kicking for goal." I'll be like, well, at least he's he's following the process. So there's that side of it. A few other guys have used it for as part of their pre-bed routines, done some down regulating breath work. As a club as a whole, one of the footy clubs I've worked with, they'll use it as players come off on the interchange. They'll have maybe 3 minutes on the bench as a rotation. The goal there is just to get the heart rate down, recover very quickly. And then they can get back on. And the guys that have been doing that have said that their recovery is just amazing. And it's about just going down through the gears for them, because they spend most of the game in gear 3, mouth inhale, mouth exhale, because it's just very high intensity. And then when they come off, they go down to a gear 2, into a gear 1, and most of them are back to nasal breathing well within a minute.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Dropping their heart rates very rapidly. So there's a number of different applications for it in that kind of sporting environment, depending on the sport and depending on positions as well, for different sports. That's
what I love about the breath, is there's so many different applicable tools for different situations. And really, when you've got a wealth of knowledge like yourself, you can go into a place and say, hey, well, this is utilized for this is utilized for this, you can use this for here. And that just means they can take away and use it for the position that they can benefit from. Or they think, okay, well, actually, yeah, I've struggled sleeping at night time, or I don't recover too fast to get back on the pitch again. It's like, well, that's just going to trigger that point in their mind and go, they take one thing away, and you might get a 1% improvement in their performance, and they're happy about it. And even then they might be more receptive to listening to a bit further on as well.
It's so broadly applicable. It can be a bit of a double-edged sword as well, depending on the audience. So depending on how it's communicated to the audience too, because it's so applicable to so many different areas, it can be difficult to get the biggest bang for your buck in a very short period of time with a large group, because there's so many,
of course,
so many different needs that there are in a particular group. So but it's early days, I think, with breath in the performance world, very early days, and I think we'll see it evolve a hell of a lot over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, I agree. You know, with the likes of Andrew Huberman pushing the science and talking about the science and seeing how much is now going into it, not just from a performance aspect, but from a health aspect. We're going to see like we did 3 or 4 years ago with sleep. I think we're going to start seeing that with breathing next, or we at least need to.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think with I know with AFL, there's been a big switch over the last 5 or 10 years to be looking at treating players as humans as well as athletes, and and all that comes with that. And we're seeing in professional sport here in Australia a lot with players taking like leave away from clubs due to mental health reasons, and some players have even retired. So I think there's all that aspect of it as well, aside from the sporting performance. It's it comes back to what we talked to at the start with, high performance itself. You've got to be, if you're not performing well as a human being, first of all, you're unlikely to be perform well at your sport. If your life is a train wreck, it's hard to go out on a Saturday afternoon and perform well at your sport, sort of thing. So it all kind of comes around.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate this conversation. Just before we jump off, just if anyone wants to reach out to you to maybe do some coaching with you, where can they contact you? Which is the best way?
Probably the best place is just Instagram, which is just Jason Donaldson _ or my website, which is just jasondonaldson.net.
Nice, brilliant. Appreciate your time. And
no worries. It's been a pleasure, Martin.
No worries. You take care, buddy. Thank you.